Had a funeral for a friend of mine and told the story to those who'd gathered a number of years ago. I had a youth group, and this friend and his wife and family were very gracious, inviting us to go on a camping trip to a camp spot that they owned near the Middle Fork River. And so we did, had a large group of young people, and we were there that first evening, and I had the prayer right before we were to have our dinner. And my friend came up to me, he said something that he'd never really commented on before. He said to me, I want you to know I really liked that prayer. I thought, wow, I've really made an impression on him. I have ushered him into the very presence of the holy. I have connected him to God just in this prayer, maybe in a way that he'd never been connected. And so I said to him, why did you like the prayer? And he said, because it was short. Well, I'll take the compliment, I suppose, in whatever way that you can. I only tell you that so that you'll be ready to know that the message this morning is short. It's brief. But we still hope that, like Samuel, you will be attentive to the word that God may have to speak. As we continue the series on the power of dreams and visions, we come to this vision that young Samuel had, which contained his call from God. So the question comes to us, what are the keys to having a life-giving connection with God in a way that we can discover our purpose? We find them in Samuel's vision. What are the keys to having that life-giving connection with God in a way that we can discover our own purpose for living? First of all, hear your name. Hear your name. Eli was wise enough to realize that it was God that was speaking the name of Samuel. And so he instructed them correctly, respond to God, don't respond to me. It's God that's calling your name. And brothers and sisters, I tell you this morning, it's God that's speaking your name. The God of the universe, the God who raised up Jesus Christ from the dead, the God who loved you more than you ever dreamed or imagined, is calling your name today. The question is, will we hear it? Will we hear Him calling our name? Because it can make all the difference in the world. I've said I believe God is calling our name in the most pleading and loving voice that He can. And He's saying to us, please make me the center of who you are. He's calling our name, inviting us to follow and place His kingdom at the center of our living. He's calling our name and saying to us, I love you more than you could ever possibly know. Now live like you love me. Can you hear God calling your name today? Not long ago, I read an article of a man who was in a work-related accident. Very serious accident. As a result of that, he was left in a type of coma state. But his wife stayed by his side. The nurses and other medical persons talk about her being there hour after hour. And she kept saying his name and telling him stories. Now, I heard that sometimes people actually can hear maybe in some way amidst that. But here she was, and she would say, Charlie, I love you. Charlie, do you remember the time that we, and she would tell the story. Charlie, you know when we, on and on and on. 3 days she was there, on and off, but for many hours at a time. And indeed, as an answer to prayer, her husband, Charlie, eventually made a full recovery. And he told the story later of saying it was almost like he was in a dream state or something. But he said occasionally he would hear his name. He would hear his name somehow. He couldn't really identify where it was coming from, but he said it was true. I heard my name when I was there, unconscious. And this is the comment that he wrote. Hearing my name brought me back and kept me alive. Hearing my name brought me back and kept me alive. Now, friends, I can make that testimony myself in a spiritual sense because the day that I heard God calling my name is the day that I came back to where I needed to be in a relationship with God and living out the purpose that He had for my life. Hearing God call my name at a particular time keeps me spiritually alive today. And that truth, my friends, can come to you as well. Just like He called the name of Samuel, He calls your name. And it can bring you to where you need to be and can show you your purpose for living. Will you hear God calling your name today? Secondly, not only do we need to hear our name, we need to heed the call. Heed the call. Eli told Samuel, "Say to the Lord, Lord, speak, your servant is listening." Listen to the call that God has in your life. Instead of responding to other voices, I say what happens in our culture today, even those who are sincere in wanting to follow Jesus, we're so busy fielding other calls that we don't heed the call of God. We're so busy getting along with the other priorities that call for our attention that God gets crowded to the margins and eventually out of our lives. Heed the call. It's an old rabbinic story. You've probably heard it, but I was reminded of it when it comes to listening to the call of God over other voices. The rabbi tells of 3 thieves who plotted to steal a prized, treasured lamb from a local shepherd. And one day the shepherd was on his way down the road carrying the prized lamb on his shoulder. And the thieves had spaced themselves out, and the first thief pops out and says, "My sir, it's a fine day, and what a wonderful-looking dog you have there." And the shepherd thought to himself, "This is my prized lamb. This isn't a dog." And he moved on. The next thief a little later popped out and said, "Sir, it's a wonderful day, and what a wonderful dog you have you're carrying there." And the man said to himself, "This is my prized what?" And he looks carefully and he goes on, and finally, you know the story. The third thief pops out and says exactly the same thing. And what a wonderful dog. Well, the shepherd then says, "Well, maybe I don't have my prized lamb. It could be a dog." And he puts the prized lamb down, leaves it unaccompanied there, and goes back. And then the thieves come and snatch the treasured lamb away from the shepherd. Now, we hear those type of rabbinic stories. That's ridiculous. You know, silly. Who would ever do that? Who would ever be convinced that what really is their most treasured gift on earth is actually not that treasured and not that valuable to the point that they would leave it behind? No one would do that. Friends, the most treasured gift that we have is a relationship with the living God in Jesus Christ. The most treasured gift that we have is being able to worship God. The most treasured gift that you've been given is being able to center your family and your own life on the pursuit of God's kingdom. But the other voices out there will say, "Well, you know, it's not that prized, is it? I mean, come on, there's a lot of other things that can bring you meaning in life. Just leave that prize. Get to that prize when you can. It's not really that treasured. Follow Jesus at your own convenience. You can make too much out of this relationship stuff with God. It's not really that valuable." And we listen to the voice. To me, it's as clear cut as saying a treasured lamb is a dog. Ridiculous. Yet we do it all the time. When we treat that which is most treasured as something to be left behind, or perhaps paid attention to when we feel like it. What voice are we listening to? Are we heeding the call of God in our life? Friends, we walk a perilous path. We walk a perilous path when we fail to teach our families and our friends to heed the call of God, and teaching them instead to prefer other pursuits first. That's a perilous path. If you want to discover that vital connection to God and the real purpose for your life, heed the call of God. I've said sometimes to people, and I know, the preacher, take it easy. If we responded to our boss like we respond to God, we'd be fired sometimes. If I responded to my spouse in the way that I've responded to God, I would alienate my spouse. If I responded to my friends the way I sometimes respond to God, I probably wouldn't have any friends. If I responded to my coach like I responded to God, I'd be off the team because he'd know I wasn't listening. Friends, heed the call. Now is the time to center your heart on the treasure that matters most. There you find your purpose. Hear your name, heed the call. Finally, Hold on to the promise. God went on to do great things. The ears of the people were indeed attentive. Samuel had much to share, the last judge of Israel, the one who anointed the first king of Israel, the one who restored worship to the central life of worship. Samuel, the young Samuel, went on to be a great spiritual leader among his people because he held on to that call and that promise that God had. And so also in our lives, we hold on to the promise that God is with us. You say, I really want to do that. I want to respond to God. I hear Him calling my name. I want to heed the call of God for Him to be first priority. I'm not sure I can do that. Here's the good news. Hold on to the promise. He's with you every step of the way. No matter what you may face or go through, He's there. And you can hold on to that promise. In closing, I read an article of a gentleman who was going to prepare for the Ironman competition. And Ironman is, I guess, the ultimate of triathlons. I think they bike something almost 2.5 miles, or they bike 112 miles and swim 2.5 miles and then run a full marathon of 26.2 miles. Quite a task. He'd never done anything like that. He'd done some smaller events, and so he hired a personal trainer who had been through the triathlons. And he told him, I'm not sure I'm up to the task. The personal trainer said, yes, you can do this. And they were by a large lake. And he said, see the shore? He said, yes. He goes, we're starting our training today. You're swimming all the way across the lake. The man said, there's no way I can make it. Yes, you can. And he got in a canoe, and he started the man swimming. And the personal trainer went along beside him in a canoe and said, it's not much further. You can make it. You're strong enough for this. And he encouraged him and inspired him as he paddled along. He did the same thing with the cycling as they did hill training with the cycling. The man went along beside him. He said, this hill's not as steep as you think. You're strong enough. You can do this. He encouraged him. He showed him the way. Same thing with the running. Over many months that he did this so that he was indeed prepared for the competition when it came. And friends, to me, when I read that, that's a picture of the promise of God. Yes, life's a marathon. Yes, you're going to think you can't make it sometimes. You're going to grow weary and tired. But there's the Lord, the promise of God, right along beside you, saying, I will make you strong. He's giving us that word of encouragement. He's giving us that word of direction. That's the promise right beside us every moment of our journey. Friends, you're not hearing things today. Samuel thought he was hearing things. He was hearing God. You're not hearing things today. It's God. He's calling your name. Can you hear your name? Will you heed the call? Will you hold on to the promise? Because in that, we discover a wonderful connection to the living God, and we discover the purpose for which we were created. May God give us wisdom and understanding to hear Him on this day. Thanks be to God. Amen. One of the places